We continue now at the top of Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 22a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara asked, let's say a husband is mefer the vow of his wife. Does that completely uproot the vow, or does it just sever the vow from this point in time forward? And the Gemara brought a proof from a Mishnah later on. The Mishnah later on talks about a woman who takes a vow to become a Nazira, and then she violates the Naziris, so we say she gets Malchus. And the Gemara said, isn't that obvious? It must be talking about a case where the husband annulled the vow, and the Chiddush of the Mishnah is that he only annuls the vow from this point in time forward, and that's why she's getting Malchus. Because if it's talking about a regular vow of Naziris, and the husband did not even annul the vow, so what's the purpose of even having the Mishnah? It seems to be obvious. And so the Gemara said it could be that we're talking about a situation where there was no annulment of the vow, and the question that you're asking that it seems like an obvious case, indeed it really is an obvious case, but since the Seif of the Mishnah is talking about a case that is not obvious, so therefore the Gemara now says, Tana Nami Reisha so feges. Therefore the Mishnah also brings the Reisha of the Mishnah, that's the case where she does get Malchus. The Seif of the Mishnah was a case where she does not get Malchus because the vow was annulled, even though she didn't realize the vow was annulled, still she doesn't get Malchus. So since that is a Chiddush, so we bring the Reisha also, a case where she does get Malchus, even though that case is not really needed. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Brisa. Ha'isha shenadra b'nazir, if a woman takes a vow to be a nazir, v'nitmis, and she becomes tameh. V'yachar kach chefer labala, and then her husband, he annuls the vow for her. So mevia chatas ha'of, v'eina mevia olas ha'of. So she brings the bird chatas, but she doesn't have to bring the bird ola. And the Gemara says, V'isal kadaitach ba'al megas gayis. Now, if you think all the husband is doing is severing the vow from this point in time forward, so taisi nami olas ha'of. She should also bring the carbon ola, because she was a nazir, and she violated that nazirus by becoming tameh. But the Gemara says, V'elamai, but what are you going to say instead? Mi'akarakar, that he totally uproots the Nazirus like it was never there. So Chatasof Nami, Lo Taisi, so she shouldn't bring the Chatasof either. She should not have to bring any Karbonas. And the Gemara says, Hachinami, actually you're correct. Really, theoretically, she should not have to bring any Karbonas. However, this Brisa follows the opinion of Rebbe Elazar HaKafar. We mentioned Rebbe Elazar HaKafar on the previous Amud in a similar context. V'ham Mani, who is the author of this Brisa? Rebbe Elazar HaKafar, it's Rebbe Elazar HaKafar. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Rebbe Elazar HaKafar, Omer, Rebbe Elazar HaKafar says, why does it say that the Nazir is somebody who sinned? What sin did this Nazir commit? The reason why he's considered a sinner is because he deprives himself of wine, and that itself is a sin. And the Brisa says, "V'alo dvarim kal v'chomer, isn't it a kal v'chomer? Umazeh shelo tzir atzmo elam and ayayin nikra chote." If this individual, all he did was he deprived himself from wine, he's considered a sinner. Hamitzar atzmo mi kol davar alachas kama v'kama. If somebody deprives himself from everything, takes upon himself, for example, a voluntary fast, so that certainly that person is going to be considered a sinner. And Rashi explains, Hamani detani afagav detiyakar le naziris ma'isi lechata sa'of. Who is the Tan over here who says that even though the vow is completely uprooted, still she brings the bird chatos? Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar, it's the Tan of Rabbi Eliezer HaKafar. The Amar Ditzarech Kapara, the idea is that she requires a kapara anyway, al shetzir atzma min ayayin, because of the fact that she deprived herself from the wine. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Tosefta, the Tanya Behedya, because we learned explicitly in the Tosefta, Ha'isha shenadra b'nazir, if a woman takes a vow to be a nazir, v'shama chaverta v'amra v'ani, her friend hears her and says, I also am going to be a nazira. Uva bala shel rishona v'heferla, and the husband of the first woman comes along and he annuls her vow, so he mutaris, so her vow is mutter. However, v'chaverta asur, but her friend remains asur. And the Gemara says, Shma mina bal megas gayas. You indeed see from here that the husband simply severs the vow, because if the husband had completely uprooted the vow, then the second woman's vow as well should have been uprooted. The second woman should not be a nazir, but again, the Tosefta says explicitly that the second woman remains a nazir. And the Gemara continues, the Tosefta continues, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, Im omro la hareini kemosech. Let's say the second woman says, I am going to be like you. She doesn't simply say that I'm associating my vow of naziris to your vow, but I'm going to be like you. So then shtein mutaris. Then actually they're both mutar, because she's saying I'm going to be like you. So when the first person's vow is undone, so her vow is undone as well. And Rashi explains, U'Mesayim habraisa, the brisa finishes off, Rabbi Shimon Omer, that Rabbi Shimon says, Im Amra hareini kemosech, again, if she says, I am like you, to mashma, that already implies, Im niskayim niziruseich alay lakayim. If your nazirus is maintained, so mine is also maintained. Vim lav, and if not, lo, then it's not going to be maintained. V'kevan shehefer la ba'ala l'rishona, shtein mutaros. In that situation, since the husband of the first one annulled the vow, so the second woman is going to be like the first woman, and they're both going to be mutter. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis.